Good. Well, thank you everybody for coming here with the weather. It was kind of like an interesting drive for us too, so I really appreciate you all being here. Sitting down to hear this kind of like crazy Cuban woman talking about what's really going on in the K-12 classrooms in the land of the free nowadays in 2021. A little correction, not to pick on you, Josh, but actually, would you believe that my very first speaking engagement about these issues, in this case, wasn't that focused on education, was most like, on the loss of freedom and all that, was at the Liberty on the Road chapters that used to meet in Louisville in the barbecue place. So we're talking about like 10, 11 years ago. That's where I started telling everybody, like, hey guys, I have seen this movie before. If you don't open your eyes by the time that you do it, it's gonna be kind of like too late. I already left Cuba once. I don't know where can I go from here if we lose this one. But anyway, I digress. He was saying before, I am the Director of Community Outreach for Parents Defending Education. We are a grassroots nonprofit organization that started roughly 2 years ago. I would say probably in the height of the COVID lockdowns, the school closures and all that kind of like silver lining moment where your average parents in the United States started to get a real glimpse of what was really happening in American classrooms through the computer, the screen of a computer or a laptop that the kids had at home. I started with this organization roughly a year ago, but they have been working nationwide with this mission, like I said, for almost 2 years. I'm gonna go really quick over like the little standard presentation that they have here. This one, I already talked about that, but it explains who we are as an organization and the mission that we have in the work that we do. We're a small team. We're really like, 14, 15 people, 13 now, working nationwide. Our focus, it's returning the K-12 classroom to education, to the basics of academic instruction, and remove all ideology and indoctrination and political points with it. Why? And you say, why would this woman end up in Colorado doing this? I got a short story to tell you, and why I am passionate about what is happening, in the classroom where my American-born children are attending right now as we're speaking here. And it is that I am the proverbial child of the state. I was born and raised in communist Cuba, and I attended schools controlled by the communist Cuban government from kindergarten until I graduated from law school in the university. So trust me when I told you 14 years ago in that little place in Louisville, and right now that I can tell you that I can see those red flags coming from miles away. And if we don't do something for our kids right now, that generation is going to be completely lost. Like even many of the conversations that we have with education advocates and parents that are very engaged in their communities nowadays, we always have this realization that we're doing this battle today, but we're not the ones that are going to see the results. So whatever happened, what we're doing as an organization, as an empower parents, as families, is for our kids to be able to bank on that result. That being said, the 3 ways that we work as an organization nationwide, again, is empowering, exposing, and engage. Under the empower area, I would say that the biggest focus that we have is educating parents in their constitutional rights, in their parental rights. I don't know, this is supposed to be a video, wait. And kind of like giving them the information and the facts that has to do with legislation that protect parental rights. Like your average 8 to 5 mom and dad working and sending, with all their trust, their kids to the public school, most of them don't know that they have parental rights that are constitutionally protected. They don't know their children do not surrender their freedom of speech rights the minute that they walk in the schoolhouse. And that is just one example. So that's part of what we do, kind of like the craziest part, and the one that I love the most about working for this organization doing the outreach, is that we get to collaborate with parents groups and parents advocates in different communities, putting together trainings and groups like this and workshops so people can learn their rights as parents, grandparents, and frankly also taxpayers, because you don't necessarily have to have a child attending public school for you to have a right to, petition your government and ask for transparency on what are you doing with the taxes that I'm paying to fund this public school. So that's one part. The other one, which is probably one of my favorite, but that's kind of like the former investigative journalist in me, is that sunshine is the best disinfectant. We have, in our team, I would say that probably close to 95% of us, we have background as media or journalism, doing mostly research and investigative reporting. So we investigate and expose the truth inside the schools. And how do we do that? We get tips and referrals from any parent, any community member, any insider source. We have in our website, which kind of like works as the hub from all the information, we have a direct link where any person in any part of the United States can submit an incident report. And then we gather that information and then we investigate. We find corroborating evidence. We put out together what we call dispatches, which is, I would say, like a condensed version of a press release. Sometimes you can do it in 24 hours. Sometimes, like in cases that we're gonna see later, it takes almost a year to investigate and gather all the information, because we operate from the standpoint that we don't work with hearsay. And the minute that you see a dispatch or a news story put out that is signed under Parents Defending Education, you bet that it's been a case that has been bulletproof in a way that can stand any scrutiny. So that's one of the parts that we do. Curiously, last time that we did like a recap of this anonymous tip line that we have on the website, we were receiving an average of 250 reports per week. Granted, not all of them end up being, a story written or being reported. But when you have that kind of like average in the entire country, that's a huge, huge warning sign. The other part that we do is, in this engaging, is mostly helping and giving parents the tools and the resources to organize themselves. Or if they already have a parents group, help them connect with more people in their community, help them organize trainings and workshops like the ones that I was mentioning before. We also do some legal litigation, and I know I kind of like left it a little bit to the end, but Alex here, who also works with me, she can probably address it a little bit. We do have a track of work that we do at PDE that is a legal action and litigation. Now that I think about it, our background combination is attorneys and journalists. So no wonder the mission is established like that. We mostly focus on civil rights violations. Like, we literally use the book of the school districts and the books of the unions to expose what they're really doing. And the other legal cases that we do is mostly constitutional challenges in district courts and circuits. We're gonna go over some examples, two of the ones that we are currently working on. Some examples of those stories or those investigations that I told you about. How many of you heard around May or June last year about the middle school girl at Wellington Middle School in Poudre School District in Fort Collins that was being groomed by an art teacher in an after-school art club? Actually, John Caldara had an exclusive TV show on The Devil's Advocate with her. So this is part of the type of investigation work that we do when we receive information from parents. We do the research, we submit core and FOIA requests. We literally use the legal system of sunshine laws that they have established and signed up for to actually bring transparency and show what is really happening in the classrooms in America today. So these are some of the examples of the type of coverage that we have done and the type of incidents that we work with. Another one, this one was kind of like what we call, I don't know, like a preemptive move. We heard from parents in this school district, which, by the way, La Miranda School District is like 98% Spanish-speaking, first-generation, low-income families. So the parents heard and became aware through the minutes on the school board following meeting that they were going to vote to put a Planned Parenthood clinic in the high school building. So we were able to put these dispatches together, share the information with all the parents, groups, and education advocates that we had contact with in our network in that specific community, in that specific district. And by the time the vote went there, like the uproar of the parents, whether regardless of their position with Planned Parenthood or whatnot, that was not the point. The point is that it's not the proper role of the school, which is part of the government, to make those decisions without parental consent. So that happens, and then the whole idea was tanked in the next, in the next school board meeting they did. This is another example of the civil rights violations that we were talking about. Sadly, Colorado is like, I don't know, like the potato chips everywhere with these examples. I don't know, I think we're being beat up maybe by California only. But this is an example of one of those complaints with the Office of Civil Rights that we filed. It's still in the process. This was against Jeffco because they put together, and it's actually on plain sight in the unions, in the teachers union website. It's written in their policies, and anybody can click on the PDF and see it, where they put together these mentoring groups that were affinity groups. They were racially divided. Like, it was mentoring groups of Latino teachers for experienced teacher mentoring the Latino new teachers, or the black teacher that have been in there for the longest time mentoring only the other black new teachers coming into the school district. It's kind of like funny because it sounds like like a very repeated line, but segregation was wrong during Jim Crow, and it's still wrong today, and there is no amount of mental gymnastics that anybody can come and tell you to convince you otherwise. So that's one of the things. In cases of someone like myself, that I am a minority, it's like I see that like adding insult to injury, because if I was a teacher, I want to be mentored by the best. I don't care the color of the skin of that person. I don't care where they were born. I don't care the language they speak. I don't care if they're green. As long as they are the best, if I am a new teacher, that's the one that I want to mentor me in my career. Many of these examples, this one had to do with teachers, but many of these examples of what we call affinity groups is actually happening nowadays with our students, where they have students clubs and student support groups that are racially divided. Another example of the type of litigations that we do. This one in the Lingmar school district, which kind of like popped out in the news today too. There was a big short out in, what was it, Twitter, I think, about this lawsuit. It's because these district wrote policies to socially transition the kids, change their names and their pronouns, and it's written in their policy that they will not notify the parents. So it's literally keeping the parents in the dark, regardless of the age of the student. So in this case, we are part of the plaintiffs too in this lawsuit, and I think it's being heard or moving into the courtroom like this week or the next one. Again, it's one of those examples of the things that we normally do as an organization nationwide. Before you guys just do the quick QR, if you can get all the information there. Two things that we always like to tell parents or any community group or anybody, any audience that we talk about these things, is that we operate on the premise that we never disclose the identity of our sources. When there is cases, whether it's a news report, whether it's a case in a courtroom, we always take the name as organization to protect our parents. And even when they are listed in the court documents, they are listed as parent 1, parent 2, or parent 3. And the same thing happened with our donors. We are a nonprofit organization, and we have, the president of the law on our side to say that this is like a really high-heated environment. This is, yes, it is the hill where we, especially after we become parents, we will happily die on, but we acknowledge and we recognize that it's a very heated environment where we're doing this work. So it's really important that unless our sources explicitly request that they want to be on the record, we normally take their name and we don't disclose the identity of our donors either. That being said, I think that the best part of the rest of the topics that I had in mind, it might come from the Q&A, and I want to give you guys the opportunity to work on that. But we can discuss like the projection of the biggest issues that are affecting the public schools right now. And we can do that after Alex give you like a quick roundup of our newest adventure at PDE.
So, hi everyone. I haven't heard Mailyn give her whole like discussion here, and I feel like, I don't know, every time I talk to you also seeing this, it just like really revs me up again, even though I've been doing this for, you know, a while now. It's just like, it's awesome, so thank you. But yeah, so we have a new 501c4 side to Parents Defending Education. It's called PDE Action, and basically what that means is we can take a more politically active role in trying to get policies passed at the school board level, at the state level, and at the federal level. And we've worked with policymakers and lawmakers at all levels to do that. It started up last year. I mean, well, I should say the paperwork was done much earlier. Got involved in some school board races, which we're not doing anymore. And then, yeah, really last year tried to, you know, get the gears turning and started up with our policies. We have a whole, you know, model bill that's really modeled for the state level, focusing on parental rights and transparency in schools. We think that parental rights is a really big key to a lot of this, you know, parental rights, and also just exposing what's going on, you know, making schools actually have to be accountable for the dollars that they're spending, the taxpayer dollars that they're spending, what they're teaching kids and whatnot. So that's a little bit about the C4. I know we said that would take 5 minutes, but also would love to get to questions. And if you have any more questions for me about C4 stuff, happy to answer those.
For either of us, we have plenty of time to do that now.
You know, I'm always busy fighting the cops. I wish it was a lie, but it's not. How do we go after the people that are imposing these infractions? So I know what you said in regards to being able to change it legislatively and go after the organizations. But what about like removing qualified immunity from police? Can we remove the protections from the individuals who are giving bad advice and bad advice and bad intentions? Can we go after them individually?
Well, that's a really good question. I think in the school district environment, the way that plays out is just getting involved and holding them accountable and showing to the school board and running a Google search and get the dirt out of every single candidate that you get there. Because in their school districts as employees, especially through the union, there is a reason why we call them the K-12 cartel. They have something very similar to this immunity that we're talking about law enforcement, but it's actually in our experience in the communities where we have seen change is when literally the parents fire up and start showing up in the school board, start asking questions, the uncomfortable questions, start filing the CORA request, the FOIA request to expose the documents that say in black and white what they're doing. And that's, by the way, part of these workshops and trainings that I was mentioning before, how we empower community members and parents groups to learn how to do that, how to write the op-ed to the local newspaper exposing what is going on, how to prepare if someone calls you from a podcast or a radio show to do an interview about that topic. Even writing the 3-minute speech at the school board, it's part of what we do. But I would say that the golden rule, it's showing up. I know it doesn't sound very exciting, trust me, because I have sat in plenty of those. But showing up to the school board meeting, that's the first step in actually implementing some meaningful change in that area.
Hi, I'm sorry if I missed this, if you already said this, but where does your group come down on the, or did it come down on the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and all that stuff?
That's a really good question. I think that we started things, not things, but yeah, the famous silver lining because of all that. Because initially, during the first year of the grassroots work and parent empowerment work that PDE was doing, it was against mask mandates, against vaccine mandates, and all these. because again, it is not the proper role of the government to mandate what needs to be done for my child. Only I know what is best for my child, and I have no right to impose that on yours, because what is best for yours might not necessarily be the same. So that's like the overall philosophy that we always, defend and expose as an organization, which is the buck stops with the parent until you are 18. Unless there is, a legal reason to demonstrate otherwise, and those legal channels already exist. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. So whoever comes at you telling you that this LGBT transition plan have to be done, in the back of the parents because they don't know what's best for the kids, I tell you call the red flag, because that's not the case. And they're mandatory reporters. So if there is really a case of abuse or neglect, and they are not using the mandatory reporting channels that have been already created in this entire country for years, then they are the ones that have to be called on it. But it basically everything boils down to restoring parental rights. Teachers, school administrators, the same as doctors, nurses, healthcare providers, they are required by federal law in every single state of the United States that every time that there is a suspicion of abuse or neglect of a minor of any type, whether physical, mental, they are mandatory reporters. So that means that they have an obligation to place a report with Child Protection Services. Now, the caveat there is that even now, like in this case that we were mentioning about Wellington Middle School student, PSD tried to use Child Protection Services and weaponize the department to harass this family. So that's a whole different story of what they're trying to do, simply to silence dissent. But if that's the case and they prove it, they did the right thing. Now, if they are coming after a parent, falsely accusing them that they are abusing or neglecting their child simply because they have, let's say, a religious belief that doesn't think that there is anything else that male or female, if that's the case, then they can be prosecuted and those parents can sue them for falsely accusing them in a court of law. The employees at the school district, the teachers, the nurses, the social worker, the counselors, same with healthcare providers, they're all mandatory reporters.
So you can sue them individually?
If they falsely accuse you, yes.
Three short questions here. You talked about the K through 12 cartel. What role do teachers unions play in this system?
Let me ask you a question. Raise your hand if you have seen the documentary Whose Children Are They? See, you all going home with homework today. I think it's on Amazon Prime, and you can get it. It's 2 hours, but it's divided in different sections that is going to give you like the primer of all the issues that we're mostly dealing with the schools today. So you saw the segment there where it says how they basically are holding teachers hostages with the money that they have to pay every month, and how 98% of the money that every teachers union in this country collects goes to their democratic campaigns, and they don't care much about the reality with the teacher. I have a quick example for you. This happens at the end of last year, and it happened at the legislature in Wyoming. Because believe me when I'm telling you that even in wild Wyoming, we're dealing with this type of thing. We had in that state, the president of the teachers union, he testified in the legislature on the record saying and asking for more money on the budget for the teachers, with a huge chunk to the teachers union. And his last sentence was, oh, and by the way, I'm voting to oppose to these accountability and transparency measures that you added to the proposed bill, because basically I want you to give me the money, but I don't want you to ask me what I'm doing with it. So if that doesn't give you the whole picture of what teachers are dealing with, we have a lot of teachers, both actively teaching and retired, that work with us as, our content experts, sources, you name it. And this is what we're listening from them constantly, is like, what the union is representing is not what I believe. What the union is representing is not my job as an educator. I am not here to do that. And that's basically what overall I would say in the entire country we hear from teachers.
Wow. What, and then a second question, what are the biggest issues that you're seeing? You know, you say you get so many people reporting incidents to the website and putting in reports. As a category, what are the biggest issues? Is it around gender or race or something different?
It's literally a moving target. I think it's a moving target in a time frame per year, and it's a moving target depending on the area too. Like, for example, when PDE started, I would say, and you feel free to interject, Alex, but I would say when we started, it was first like anti-mask, anti-mandates, you know, kids need to go back into the classroom. This is going to affect their mental health. I mean, and lo and behold, look at us 2 years after and what we're dealing with. So weren't we on spot or on target with that? So that I would say that was probably the first year. It was thanks to all these parental engagement against the mandates that, you know, the whole junking campaign came to be and all that. In the second year, we saw a lot of all these transgender ideology permeating the classrooms, even at levels where these kids are not even mature or age appropriate, developed enough to be looking at these pictures or to be listening to these things. So I would say that that was like a big part of the second year, along with things like this. Violation of parental rights is overall is at the bottom of everything. And starting this year, we continue to see like the whole transgender thing. It's just getting completely like outrageous, and we're seeing a lot of problems with the whole concept of restorative justice apply in policies in the school districts. Basically, we have teachers, parents, and other students complaining of these outrageous cases of bullying, children doing what they're told to do. You know, it's safe to tell, you see something, you say something, but then the powers that be at the levels of the administration in the school district, they're not nipping in the bud these unruly behaviors. And then when a tragedy happens, like if you're all familiar with the school shooting that happened in Florida when Meadow died, her dad even wrote a testimonial book with it. Like, everybody knew what that kid was going to do. Everybody knew who were the target. For almost a year, they were talking to safe adults and administrators about it, and nobody did anything. And again, it's one of those things that this concept of restorative justice, I really don't care the ethnicity, the language, or the color of the person that is creating the problem. The problem has to be nipped in the bud, because kids go to school to learn, not to be bullied or to be dealing with violence in those age groups. So that's one that is kind of like coming up. Again, it's very frustrating for teachers because they're there to educate, and they can't do their job in those unruly environments. And it's becoming, actually, if you saw the documentary, you probably saw several testimonies there. It's becoming, you know, like a physical hazard and a dangerous situation in some middle school and high schools in this country. Like, it's getting really bad.
Wow. Last question. For the C4, the new C4, are you already, or do you have plans to get involved in school board elections in terms of trying to support candidates? And if you are, and if you're interested in having somebody help you, I'd love to.
So this is a question. Do I need the microphone? Sorry. This is a question we've gone back and forth on quite a lot. We are, like we said, a small organization. Everyone who works on the C4 side also splits time with the C3 side. So there are only 6 of us total on the C4 side. That is not enough people to properly vet all of the candidates at the 13,500 school districts across the country. So I don't think that that is where we would be best. That being said, we do have on, I think it's on the C3 website actually, model school board policies. You can always, you know, talk to us and reach out, especially on the C4 side, reach out to us if you have any, you know, questions or ideas about things. There's also a whole package on the C3 website about how to run for school board. Mailyn, you also have a really good friend, Ted.
Yeah, Ted. I would say that in this case, the approach that we have taken as an organization is that, and we do this with everything. Like, there are many, you know, education grassroots advocacy organizations in the country, and we just try not to reinvent the wheel or not to be, you know, stepping on each other's toes. Like, if we know, for example, that our constitutional cases in courts are mostly civil right violations or constitutional right violations. That's what we focus. Other organizations do something else. We might receive questions from parents or community members, maybe asking about something that is America First Legal, the one that handled those cases. So we have created in all these years this network of organizations that do similar work, and I would say the same applies to your question for the school board. It's like it's not something that we tackle, but we have the resources in our website, and we have already created a network of connections with other organizations that do that work. Similarly, like the question that you had about the teachers union, we don't actively work with that, but we do outreach with Freedom Foundation, for example, and we know that that's what they tackle. That's their specialty, so we're not going to be double dipping into that when we can refer, you know, the people that are interested directly to what the infrastructure that they have already created.
Yeah. That's, sorry if I may add just one more thing. That's a really important part about, I mean, both PDE and PDE Action, honestly, is I think we do a really great job at like acting as the nexus between, you know, all different types of nonprofit organizations that work in sort of different, maybe tangential or adjacent parts of this, you know, issue, and then, you know, like from people to lawmakers and whatnot. So I think we do a really good job connecting there. Last thing, Moms for Liberty chapters have been pretty good on this school board race thing, just, you know, being able to vet good candidates and everything. So they're good. So that is really, that's a distinction in the IRS tax code for like how we file as a business. And the difference, yeah, 501c3, 501c4, and C3s can do some lobbying if they take what's called the H election. I'm also not a lawyer, so like, you know, make sure you're double checking me on everything. I'm just telling you what I've been told. But C4s can do more politically active lobbying type work.
I had a quick question. So I know you're from Cuba. You talked about going through the whole educational system. Can you talk about the parallels that you're seeing here now that reflect what you saw in Cuba, and also what does Cuba look like now? Because I think a lot of us have no idea, really.
So you really want to know about the parallels? How much time do you have?
I mean, bullet points.
Do you want the short? Do you want the long version or the short version?
Short version's probably good and slightly less horrifying.
I would say that it's pretty much the same, but in English and with Wi-Fi. Yeah, like literally it's the same. It's like the same way that they have my student records when I was in school in Cuba. Mine were in paper. Here we have them in all this new IT technology that get hacked by everybody and their mother every time they can. They're data mining the personal and private information of our minors' children for profit. So that part of, there are questions that should be protected by the PPRA amendment that says that topics such as finances, sexual orientation, religious views, whether somebody have been in jail or not, can only be asked to a minor provided that the parent gave a signed consent prior to the question being asked. None of that is happening with all the surveys that our students are receiving in the classroom today with organizations like Panorama and CASEL that are making a lot of money data mining the private information of our kids in school. So that's just one example. The whole idea of diverting the concept of classical education to mere pure indoctrination, that's what is happening in the classrooms in this country today. And I don't know, I still have a hard time believing it, and it's one of the reasons why when many people ask, you know, why do you do this or why do you do that? It's like, I think that it would be supremely ironic that I left my life in Cuba close to 23, 22 years ago with 2 suitcases and $200 in my pocket for my American-born children to end up in the same disaster that I have to escape from. So yeah, if anybody wants a reference of which one would be a good hill to die on, I can tell you that would be mine, no questions asked. The same thing, it's like I said, we're in 2023 now. Things are more advanced. You have the computers, you have this. But at the end, the core idea and the core plan is the same, and it's the good old divide and conquer. especially in the middle school and high school ages. Teenagers in this age is like the hardest part of their life, and that's exactly what they did with me. They sent me to a school away from my house where I would see my parents only two weekends during the month, and that's where the indoctrination mill took place, in a way that I would be fighting my parents by the time I got home, because then the state was always going to know better than my parents. And the premise of everything that is happening in this country today is exactly the same. But like I said, in a different language and with a little bit more of technology.
I have a question regarding, do you do something to expose this fraudster's theory directly to children, to kids? Because this CRT theory, this transgender agenda, socialism agenda, I believe it's not very difficult to actually show children who is benefiting from this fraud, how the children are victims of this fraud, and maybe after that it will be much more productive than just speaking with parents.
Well, we now know what the whole goal is, which is, divide and conquer, especially at these very vulnerable ages, because it's easy to brainwash them what is happening nowadays today is that our children are constantly being whispered in their ears that their family and their parents are the enemy. And that's exactly, to go back to George's question, that's the environment that I grew up for 27 years of my life. So we have been exposing things like all these CRT theories, how it's being embedded in the classroom, how teachers are putting that in every single subject area in the classroom. Now, what we're seeing in the K-12 schools today is just like the last trigger effect. This did not start with our kids in school. This started decades ago when the progressive movement took over the School of Educations of American higher education institutions. So what we're seeing now is that instead of forming educators for the last decades, they have been forming activists. And now our kids are the ones that are being taught or educated, with huge air quotes, by these teachers that are no longer the concept of classical educator that many of us grew up with. And that's where the whole trickle starts. So at this point, at least an organization like ours, that's what we work with, is finding these incidents and writing the reports and putting it out in the media. We always empower parents and community members to start with the teacher, with the principal, with the school district, but experience has told us that there is only one language that these people in power understand. And it is when you lay out their entire deck in the media for them to know exactly what's happening and what they're doing. And to add insult to injury, we, the taxpayers, are the ones paying for all that. So if that is not the definition of some sort of extortion where we are the ones writing the checks for somebody to turn our own children against us, I really don't know what to call it.
I had a question. You've talked a lot about what parents can do and what taxpayers can do. What can kids themselves do? Like, say they don't buy the propaganda, but they're trapped in a classroom where they're being preached at all the time.
Well, my Cuba-induced PTSD would tell me that the way that I survived it was by having two faces. The real me was with my family in my house, and then when I was in the school, I was, showing my loyalty to Fidel Castro and the Communist Party. Obviously, I would not recommend that, but I would think that it's something that is going to depend on the age of the child, their maturity, their development level, and number two, it's going to depend on the environment and the type of communication channels that you have already created with your children. Just to give you like a quick example, in the middle of the lockdowns, one of the reasons why I took my younger daughter out of a really good school in South Carolina and start homeschooling her was because of something that I heard during a class over Zoom. And when I heard that teacher, I was like, wait, what? She's not your child. It's mine. And in this specific topic, I am the one that calls the shots. So we sat down, her father and I, we sat down with her and we told her, okay, some people are going to come and say this and that. If somebody asks you, you know, if anybody's sick at home, or if, you know, if you wear a mask or this and that, you're going to say, no, my mommy and my daddy told me that I don't need to answer those questions. But we're talking about like a 5 or 6 year old. When you have a teenager, you have a different level of development. You can sit down and say, hey, this is the reason why I opted out for every survey. It's like, I have read the surveys. It's exactly the same questions that they used to ask my parents and my neighbors when I was going to school in Cuba. They don't need to know my political affiliation. They don't need to know which church we go to. They don't need to know if you have thought about suicides. When something like that happens, your mom and your dad are the first trusted people that you need to talk about with that. So there are many variables in that question, and it's going to depend, obviously, number one, on the type of communication that the parents and the family have with the child, and number two, on the age and the level of maturity or development that child might have, depending on the topic.
Any last questions?
All right, so I understand the divide and conquer being similar with Cuba 2000, I guess, it was 23 years ago, right, versus the U.S. now. What particular issues did they use? I imagine there wasn't transgender and CRT, but what kind of things did they use then as opposed to what they're using now? Because that's what it sounds like to me, that CRT, transgender, it could be anything, really.
It could be anything,
right.
yeah. The topic, and even with the progressive movement and everything that is happening in the school districts in this country nowadays, you can see the trends on how the topics and their goals change. I mean, the process is the same. I would say for me, growing up in Cuba was invasive surveys and questions. The whole transgender thing was not that strong back then. I mean, communists are notoriously for, killing without due process and imprisoning homosexuals and all that, because they don't fit their concept of, the new man that is supposed to support the revolution and all that. So the topic itself, it could be anything, it could change, but at the end, the method and the end goal is the same. Like I was saying, in our case, they would do those surveys asking questions without our parents knowing. They would do the vaccines clinics in the school without your parent being present. At this point in my life, I still have no idea what the hell I got in the 12 years that I went to school in Cuba, because nobody read it. I mean, the whole concept of informed consent was something that I learned after being in this country for almost 10 years when I started working in a hospital. So again, the topic might be different, it might change, but at the end, the methods, like the whole methodology that they have, the process to do it is the same, which is bank in the minds of the younger generation to shift the paradigm where they are seeing the state as their Lord and Savior, and their parents are the dissidents, are the troublemakers, are the domestic terrorists, and all those names that they want to call us now.
Okay, last question. What do you think is the best thing for sort of your average parent or your average person to do in their daily life to help fight this? Is it just to read books, get on Twitter, go to their school board? What is the most effective thing?
You want to get it started?
Sorry. Reading books is great. Definitely read. I'm not saying not to read, but read what your kid is reading in school. Look at your kid's homework assignments. Go to school board meetings if you can. Both of my parents are teachers, meaning they had full-time jobs and, might not necessarily want to attend a 4-hour meeting. But, do what you can to know what's going on in your kid's school. Honestly, stay off Twitter as much as you can, because it's a cesspool of ignorance, so.
Yeah, and I would say getting involved, if you have kids, sign up with your teacher to volunteer in the classroom. You're going to be the proverbial fly on the wall when you do that. Do that, like Alex said, check the homeworks there, look at the messages. If you have a time, even if you cannot show up in the school board, go online and check the agenda. Pick up what they're planning to discuss. That's how we learn. We have been working in the Western Slope with another story where they want to put a clinic in a high school where they are going to be, especially now after this new mental health legislation that was shoved down our throats in Colorado, they're planning to do referral for counseling and all that without parental consent, without the parents knowing. So getting involved at any little level that you can, it's what is actually going to make the biggest difference in what is happening right now. As about what is SEL when they give you your third grader, schedule of specials. You see music, you see this, and then you saw SEL, and I'm like, what is this? And then you go to places like ours. I wish that we could open the website. So if you guys is going to the website, it's like the coolest thing ever. We have something that is called the heat map. So when you open the map, you're gonna see the red. If you open it on your phone, you're gonna see the red dots where you can pinpoint each press release with incident reports that we have filed in the entire country. You can also do a search in your state and school district to find if there is a parents group that already was formed and you want to join them. We have another map that is called, it was a huge project that we did last year. It's called the Consultants Scorecard. It shows who are these third-party companies that are banking on the private information of our children, who are the people that are getting taxpayers' money, big checks and big contracts to teach things like CRT, SEL, and all this stuff. And the latest one that I think we put out, that one, it was before Christmas. It was Crack Foundations, which is like a really cool name. One of the many questions that I gather from parents and community members very often when they start asking about this, they are like, okay, but who are these companies? Who pays them? Where do they come from? And that was kind of like the idea behind this project. So we were able to track, I think it was like 5 foundations, and how they issue grants for school districts, and those grants are earmarked, literally, written right there in their bid tabulation documents, in the final contracts. You can read how the money is earmarked to teach transgender ideology, CRT, to support the activities of BLM in schools, and everything under the sun. So once that you get all that background information, and I know at some point it feels like a lot to take in, that would be part of those first steps to getting involved and actually do little things here and there that could, possibly impact and create something different or change in your school district, in your child's schools, but definitely showing up, because you can even read it in their faces now. Like, they really get nervous when they have a grandma or a mom or somebody volunteering in the classroom. If what they're doing is so good, think about it. If what they're doing is so life-saving and it is so good, why do they have to keep it in the dark?
One last question.
This is maybe sort of a two-part question or kind of related. Are you seeing that some of this is a result of parents becoming less involved with their students or their children and wanting to, delegate this to the state so they don't have to? And then, are you seeing any difference between urban school districts and rural school districts in terms of some of the pressures in these areas?
I would say that with the part that has to do with the parental responsibility, we're all individuals. We cannot, throw everybody on the same bag. I would say that it's going to be like everything in life. You're going to have all the spectrum of, parental responsibility on every family. So that might be definitely some of those cases. On the second one, regarding the, big metro areas and rurals, in this outreach work that I have been doing, traveling and visiting with parents everywhere, I have noticed that it's actually not that different. Like, I have been doing workshops and training and speakings with parents groups in places like Rocky Ford in Colorado, and I have had parents get in the microphone at the end of my presentation and say, this is rural Rocky Ford in Colorado. That's never going to happen here. And I'm like, honey, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but here I have the receipts. It is happening under your nose. And the only reason why you didn't do it is because you never volunteered in the classroom, you never heard about it, and you never show up to the school board when they were voting on something like this. So I would say, at least from my experience, it's happening everywhere. Granted, when we're talking about big metro city areas, larger school districts, like with these massive millions that they get in budget, when something like that happens, you're gonna see it blow up on the news more. But trust me, it is happening in Hay, Kansas right now, too. So that should tell you that is everywhere.
That's our talk. Give it up for Mailyn.
Thank you.